We're talking about how to address the police and tragic situations where our neighbors are maybe putting, as you indicated, Brett, with the situation in Brentwood, in New Hampshire, a small town, police officer killed recently in some sort of a shooting. The homeowner also killed in that circumstance. There was an explosion. It's been all over the news, at least up here. People have been putting insignias and or the badge of the police on their Facebook profile.
Yes.
And that may be an indicator that this is not a person with whom you want to start a conversation, at least at that moment, about police abuse and how bad the cops can be.
So the whole victory lap concept is people jumping on the opportunity, not waiting even a day, to let the tragedy of an event like this or Sandy Hook sink in for the other people who might be their friends on Facebook or Twitter or wherever. And they just launch right into what, for many people, probably perceive as an attack. And that is basically when you hit somebody like that in a highly emotional state, as far as your political ideas are concerned, I think more often than not, you've made an enemy for life.
Brett is with us from the School Sucks Project, and you were telling us before the show, Brett, that you wanted to talk about something that you called, for lack of a better term, the Libertarian Victory Lap?
Yeah. This might upset some people, I think. But I think this is important. I've been watching this go on for some time, mostly on Facebook. And I think it's just something that people should be conscious of, or I'd like to see people be conscious of it. I mean, people can do whatever they want, of course, but a tragedy happens, right? Something terrible. People die. Sandy Hook was a good example. Sandy Hook was where I really first noticed this. And then I noticed in my newsfeed on Facebook that people were posting things like, see what happens in a gun-free zone? And that doesn't show a lot of empathy at all. And it's really not a winning strategy as far as like PR is concerned to express excitement and satisfaction when other people die. Not directly because other people died, but it still is being, kicked off by that. So
it's like the people's deaths are a tool for your political ends kind of thing?
Exactly. So I was listening to your show from last night, and you had a caller named Tom, who is at this point basically notorious for calling in and, being excited one way or the other about the death of police officers.
Yeah.
So you could see him exercising just a little bit of restraint, not enough for me not to notice, when he was describing the story of how cops were shot during a drug raid. Now, obviously, these are people, objectively speaking, these are people who are going armed into some place that is not their property, where other people are armed, and they're getting shot. And, that's in many ways justifiable. But there's still this question of, should it be something that could be interpreted by others, outsiders, as being celebrated by voluntarists or libertarians or anarchists? Mm-hmm. And it's troubling when I see this. So this came back into my head first because of Tom's call yesterday, but also because of the situation that happened in New Hampshire just a few days ago.
Some cop was killed, right?
A cop was killed, and quite a story. It actually happened in Brentwood, which is the town that I lived in still at this point most of my life until I was 18 years old. I lived in Brentwood. I grew up in Brentwood, New Hampshire, and I know a lot of people there. So
Brentwood, always up to no good.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
This is actually the first bad thing that's ever happened there that I know of.
Okay.
Aside from car accidents. So the town of Brentwood is maybe 3,500 people, and I'm friends with, quite a few people on Facebook just because, we grew up in Brentwood, or their friends of my mom or something, and they say, hey, I know you, and you're on Facebook. How, baby boomers are on Facebook.
Sure, people search Brentwood, and you come up.
So I've seen this interesting juxtaposition on my wall in the last couple of days where all of these people that I know from Brentwood are changing their profile pictures to the Brentwood police badge.
Oh, boy.
Now, I'm not in that camp by any stretch of the imagination, but then I also see things like cop broke into someone's house and got shot. Good.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about a blogger who, in his own words, was celebrating the death of this cop.
I'm looking at a post like it right now.
A celebratory post.
Yeah, I'm glad he's dead. Another politician's lapdog put down like the mad attack dog they are. Nothing less than what people who work enforcing the edicts of politicians deserve.
Okay, now I knew who this person was.
The cop?
Yeah. I know a lot of people who knew him. I know that he had a family. I agree with everything that I've heard people say from pure principle standpoint. He was an intruder in somebody else's home. He was, brandishing a firearm. Certainly, in a just world, if somebody who is part of a criminal gang did that, that is the consequence. But I'm still wondering if that's something that it's okay to say, if it's smart to say, if that's really going to be a winning strategy. Or if the people who say these things are just functioning in this insular world where if they have a blog, they know who reads their blog. Mm-hmm. Their blog doesn't exist for the purpose of outreach. And if they're posting this stuff on Facebook, they know who their Facebook friends are. And they don't care who sees it because most of the people who see it are probably going to agree with it. But I just thought it was interesting because I've had maybe just a tiptoe in the Brentwood people memorializing the cop camp. Yep. It's because they're people I know, and I knew who this guy was, and I lived in that town, and there is some connection or certainly some empathy for those people. But obviously, most of my weight is in this other camp, on the other foot, and I just think it's an interesting situation.
I think that it's this happens a great deal. Is that people are able to point to somebody who's on the extreme other side of the position, whatever it is, and say, "See, look. This is what they think of us." And either side, you pick the extreme side of this position. They putting up the worshiping of the state in this situation. Oh, it's terrible that a person who went inside somebody else's house with a gun has been shot and killed. Let's all memorialize him in a way that we would not memorialize anybody else
right.
killed in New Hampshire.
Right.
Okay? People have been killed there's 1.4 million people in New Hampshire. People get killed every week in New Hampshire in doing their jobs. This guy's job wasn't going to be making anybody safer by going into this house in all likelihood. I don't know the specifics of the circumstance, but it's unlikely. However, on the other side of the situation, when you've got a picture, and I'm looking right here of it, of a cop that's bloodied and bashed, and it says, "Good cop?" Well, he is now. You're making their case on both sides. Both sides of this, you're making their case, and you're being the straw man that they're looking for, and it just polarizes people and puts them in other camps.
Yeah.
It's going to make it that much more difficult for me to talk to somebody about, hey, well, look, I feel terrible for this man and his family. I really do. Obviously, he was just doing his job, but we've got to consider the job for a second. There's 40,000 drug raids in America every year. Most of them are done over the drug war, home raids every year, and most of them are done over the drug war. Why not stop the drug war, and then you won't have as many dead cops? As a matter of fact, you won't need as many cops, and people can do other jobs. You can allocate funds more efficiently in our society, and we can grow more quickly to whatever that is that we're going to achieve in the future.
Do you think a longer explanation like that? Because that's a longer version of a gloat, right?
It's tough to make that a meme.
It is. It's not a meme.
Right.
Do you think that longer version that you just explicated there, is that something that is going to be persuasive to a person who has put up the cop thin blue line or the badge as their profile picture? It's certainly talking in calmer terms and not using ridiculous hyperbole or whatever certainly is.
Well, now you're going to find my bias,
preferable.
Ian. My bias is I've got a news story that I just found today that says that 4% of people believe that they're in the bottom 50% of intelligence.
Okay, so meaning everybody thinks they're pretty bright.
Yes, 55% of people believe that they're relatively smart. Mm-hmm. Me too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the difficulty I have is that if I try to use reason and persuasion with somebody who isn't facile with that kind of thinking, way of thinking, critical thinking and reason, I'm not going to have much luck.
And when I see this kind of stuff, I do always...
I've done it. I can say for sure there have been posts I've made out of just frustration or whatever, where I've just said, this is what I think, and then somebody will be upset with me about it, and I'll say, well, what are you doing reading my Facebook profile? If you don't like what I say, why are you reading this? And so are you arguing, Brett, that people who have strong feelings should withhold them, should think twice before they post?
No, of course. I don't want to say people should anything, but I just think that it's important that we have, when some other blogger writes a post about celebrating the death of a cop, I think that a good counter is exactly what we're doing right now. Turning a meme or a short blog article into a conversation that goes into more detail. I think it's important that we do this.
I agree with that. 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. We can talk more about it coming up here, and ways to make your life better on the way. This is Free Talk Live. We're launching into the second hour of the program, and you can take control of the airwaves. We may actually resume at some point the list of 30 things to stop doing to yourself, but we're going to go to the phones first, and also maybe flesh out the discussion a little bit more on the victory lap, the gloating that some will do in the aftermath of a tragedy. Mm-hmm. An unexpected happening, like recently here in New Hampshire, there was a cop who was apparently shot, and another man who was killed in some way. I haven't done any research into the story. I've just seen the headlines, so I don't know, number one, why the cop was there in the man's house in the first place. Apparently, the cop ended up getting killed. The man apparently perished in some sort of an explosion, or perhaps for some other reason, but there was also a subsequent explosion blowing a hole in the house's roof and other places.
Yeah.
So I don't know had you read any further into that, Brett?
Even the Boston Globe this morning said the details of the whole event were still pretty sketchy. The gentleman who shot the man who shot the cop had no prior criminal record. There's some reports of people in the neighborhood. Now, it was an over 55 community too, so
yeah, that's interesting.
When people hear noise, they live in a quiet town like Brentwood, New Hampshire, and they're 68 years old, and they hear people yelling, who are you going to call? And that's sad that that's the way it is.
So there was an argument? There was some sort of a fight in the house?
The police officer was sent there to investigate a domestic disturbance.
Okay.
I guess he found one.
For some reason, he went into the house with his gun drawn, apparently, and he was shot. So, yes.
And there's reasons why a police officer would respond to a domestic dispute and then enter a home with his gun drawn, right?
Yeah.
Like there's viable reasons that might occur.
And I mean, Brentwood is a town that has a small police force, and I know somebody on the force, that I'm friendly with even. So I see how this affects people. And I was a little disturbed by, like I said, the victory lap, the I told you so, the celebration of this event. And this is not a town filled with thug cops, just from my experience. Now, certainly there are towns that are in New Hampshire, as we know, as many of us have had experience with, right? Certain towns come to mind. My experience is different than one that would lead me to celebrate the death of one of Brentwood's cops.
So are you saying, you're not saying don't post how you feel, but on the other hand, if you are going to post how you feel, maybe you should be more cognizant of how it'll be received?
I'm really happy for the Larkin Roses of this world. The people who will say things that I won't. I have a Facebook page for the School Sucks show. I've been trying to post on it more regularly, and what's available if you want to post 10 times a day is mostly memes. And memes can be pretty snarky. And I find myself posting things saying, oh, I would never post this on my personal page. So yeah, I'm glad.
I don't. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad I have this other page where I can put this stuff that is a little bit more cutting, but it's funny. So I'm glad that people like Larkin exist who will say things that I won't, and I think that our only counter is not to shame them or say that, oh, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't talk that way, is to try and balance it the best we can.
To use it as an excuse to talk about the issue?
Yeah, well, to balance it with deeper conversations. And I'm not saying, I mean, Larkin is a genius, so I'm not trying to single him out. He's a brilliant guy and certainly capable.
Well, there's one can be a genius in getting likes and responses on your Facebook page, and not necessarily a genius in convincing people, too.
It's true. Let's go to the phones here and talk to Paul. He's in Nashville. And Paul, you're on Free Talk Live, the Brett and Mark.
Hi, it's actually Nashua, New Hampshire, listening on 1590.
Excellent.
Anyway, good discussion. I guess I was calling it because I think most of what I was going to say has been covered just now, but there was some discussion of the drug war and everything, and my understanding is this is not related to the drug war. This is a call for a domestic dispute. I guess we can't really know exactly what happened between when the cop rolled up and when he entered the house, but there are completely, to my mind, legitimate reasons that if he rolls up and he sees somebody threatening somebody else with a gun or something in the house, there could be legitimate reasons there for responding, and I certainly wouldn't, obviously, even if the cop was in the wrong, it's never right to celebrate a tragedy. But in this particular case, it seems like the cop may have been acting justly. It's quite possible that he did, enter in order to save somebody's life that was being threatened, and that's what, as far as everything that I've read, that could have been what happened.
Sure. Yeah. I would even just take, you said celebrating a tragedy. I think that a lot of people would say, just based on what I saw, they would say, oh, I don't celebrate tragedy. This is a victory over the state.
But some people will, some people will post like the stupid criminal of the day story or photo, right?
Sure they will,
and they'll say, look at this dumb butt. He did this thing and ended up, slit in half by the store's escalator. I don't know. I'm just coming up with something.
Yuck.
What's that?
Yuck.
Right, and then, celebrating a tragedy in that circumstance.
But that's okay because it's a criminal. Not someone wearing a badge.
Right. Well, and the assumption is that they're always, there was criminal intent there. I think if it's a domestic dispute, we don't know why this police officer went. He could very well have seen something through a window, heard, you hear a blood-curdling scream, you just pull up outside. You are the law enforcement officer.
And now no one's going to know because he's dead, right? So we don't.
How do you handle that?
The story was
one thing that makes a lot of this possible too is distance. If you're in the mall and you see a man do something stupid and get sliced in half by the escalator, you don't go. I'm guessing that almost everybody would not go up and say, ha ha.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
But you start putting this distant, maybe he's 30 states away. It's over the internet. It's already been made into a meme.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's not as real anymore. And I can remember there was this debate a couple of years ago in the Free State Project. A police officer in Stratham, I believe, was killed. And there was some talk of going and protesting, or maybe not protesting, but demonstrating at his funeral.
Oh, what a good idea!
Worst idea ever. As far that actually made me at the time want to distance myself from all things.
You know how good the PR for the Westboro Baptist Church. They have
exactly.
Great PR, so, you can imitate them.
Yeah,
but a lot of people. Yeah, but a lot of people were saying that, wow, this would be a really good outreach opportunity for the drug war. It's a good outreach opportunity for nothing. It's just a PR suicide as far as I'm concerned. But that is different because that actually would have been face to face, and it would have been interesting to see how some people would have behaved, even if they have these strong anti-cop views. It would have been interesting to see what the impact would be if they came face to face with the grieving family of a cop at that cop's funeral. Which,
well, we know the Westboro Baptist Church people did it because they wanted people to fight them. They wanted angry, grieving family members to come at them so they'd have the ability to sue and gain some sort of financial advantage.
So that's just really like a racket more than anything, I think.
Seemed like it. Paul, any other thoughts you want to share?
Well, yeah, I just think that it's important to not view, collectivism is wrong regardless.
Amen.
And I think viewing somebody as a cop just because they're a cop, they're the bad guy. Let's look at the individual circumstances here. It's very different. If he busted in a drug raid to this family peacefully sitting there, it would still be a tragic situation, but it would be different. Then this circumstance, he may have been responding to somebody seriously in danger, and we shouldn't just judge somebody because they're a cop.
I agree that you shouldn't do that, and thank you, Paul. I appreciate hearing from you. In fact, I wanted to point to further that point a little bit. When I moved to New Hampshire, I was angry at the police because I'd seen so many stories and heard so many stories and known people who'd had their lives torn apart by but personal stories as well. Personal friends of mine who had been arrested and their lives made worse by the police, and it was easy to saddle all police with that same responsibility for, every cop must be the same. They're all part of the thin blue line.
Well, it's said in the Liberty Movement that all cops are bad. The very act of being a cop is bad at times, and people say this in the Liberty Movement.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to address here. We can continue in a moment at 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. And how my perspective changed on that after moving up here. More on the way. You can take control on Free Talk Live. This is Free Talk Live, and of course, you can bring up whatever's on your mind. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. We still have the 30 things, of which we have done 9 of those things. 30 things to stop doing to yourself. We can continue that list, which we've been doing now for off and on over the last month and a half.
4 months or so, yeah.
So we'll continue that here in a little bit. Also, you can join us online over at freetalklive.com. And I was talking about the police and how when I moved to New Hampshire, I was pretty mad about the police. And to me, police were just this nondescript, nebulous mass of people who all operated by the same principle of, make life hell for peaceful people and every now and then bust a real criminal. And while I still think that police do things that are wrong on a regular basis, one of the shifts that happened with me here in New Hampshire is getting to know the police as human beings. And that's something that I don't think you can avoid as an activist in New Hampshire, because as an activist, you're going to encounter the police. Likely. If you're out doing activist things, if you're just voting or something, you're probably not going to. But if you are out doing activist-y kind of things, you're going to encounter the police. You're going to get to know these guys, whether you like it or not. And that will result in them being more real, I think, to you.
Yeah.
And you realizing that, these guys aren't monsters. Most of them aren't monsters. And they're just people like you and I who, in this case, they believe they're doing right, following their orders, doing their jobs, that they've been told this story about how they need to do these things for the functioning of society, etc., etc. But we believe that they're doing wrong by hurting peaceful people, arresting people for victimless crimes, and looking at them as monsters, treating them as monsters is never going to convince them that they're doing the wrong thing.
You can never shame somebody into seeing eye to eye with you. And someday I hope there's like a definitive study on the ratio of bad apples to the rest of the bunch, so we can finally know, is it 5%? Is it 95%? It's probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah, it is a profession that does attract monsters, but I would, guess that less than half of the people who are police are in it for the worst of intentions.
Well, I can tell you that prison guards are more roundly vilified than police officers in society. And my experience with them was that, the 25% of them I would have considered to be pretty sick sociopaths. 25% of them I would have considered to be really good people. And about 50% of them I would have considered folks making a living.
Yeah.
So that was my experience.
So I think what happens when you have a tragedy like the Brentwood, is it?
Yeah.
In New Hampshire, a small town, you said you lived a long time there and you don't remember anything happening like this, where a police officer was shot, there was an explosion in a home, the homeowner's dead. So it's been a lot of news up here in New Hampshire about this happening. And so you were talking about how distance, people far away from this can be more insensitive to it. And I think also the people who are maybe new to New Hampshire, who are still stuck in that old mentality about the police being bad, are also likely to be more insensitive to this and say what they think. And then the people who have known this officer, or they lived in the town, they know people who know him. If they don't know him directly, they probably know somebody who knows him directly, because that's how small things can be here in New Hampshire. I mean, even in a larger place like here in Keene, you said there's, what, 3,500 people in Brentwood?
I would say New Hampshire's probably about, or Brentwood, New Hampshire is about 3,500.
Even here in Keene, there's 24,000 people, and everybody seems to know everybody else.
Sure.
So, these folks are seeing a friend and or a friend of a friend who's been killed, and of course he's a police officer, so they give him the benefit of the doubt, and either way, it's a tough situation for them, and I can totally understand why it would come off as really off-putting if somebody else was just harping about how, good riddance, cop, you scumbag.
Yeah,
that would really upset those people. But there's also a certain level of people who, even if you candy coat your opinion with them about the police, that it won't matter. Like there's no way to express disdain for some of the things the police do without being labeled a cop hater, without being told that
It's true. Well, I mean, there's some people that are going to, no matter what the social norm is, they're simply going to adopt the social norm because they don't want to be excluded from the group. Mm-hmm. These people are the most the most powerful glue for social norms because they won't listen to reason. They're not interested in reason. They're not interested in any of the words coming out of your mouth. Well, yeah, maybe such and such, but, and then it's all over.
Let's go to Daniel in Indiana. You're on Free Talk Live, listening via TuneIn. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Hey, what's on your mind tonight?
My question is along the lines of cops. I don't want to classify all cops as bad, but at the same time, I don't want to classify all cops as heroes, like happens, in schools and TV shows, media,
Sure.
things like that.
Yeah.
I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and I was kind of wanting maybe some insight from Mark and Brett too. What are some age-appropriate things that I could use to just sort of educate my daughter as she goes along the years that cops are just people doing jobs and not,
That's a good question.
I keep saying that the indoctrination is strong in that area. I've got to say, I don't have great answers for you. There's lots of toys out there that are going to be aimed directly at inculcating your child with statism, right? There's military, there's Green Army men.
Lego police.
Lego police. Jack loves the Lego police stuff. I mean, you don't get the good helicopter unless you get the police helicopter.
Sure.
And, these, you just got to keep on saying things like, letting them know that just because somebody's got a hat and a badge doesn't make them the good guy, and just because somebody's got scruff on their face and a sock hat doesn't make them the bad guy. And it's amazing how much of that stuff goes on. Take a look at the Lego City stuff.
Yeah, I think too that it's a lesson that can be built on a foundation of universal values and preferable behavior, right? It's wrong to initiate force. It's wrong to steal. It's wrong, to threaten or aggress against somebody else. So, I mean, if that is universalizable, if I can make up a word for the sake of this conversation, then clearly, eventually, they would understand that this person who's wearing this costume is potentially a threat if they are not adhering to those universal principles that self-ownership, non-aggression, and property rights, because they don't. You would be a cop for a day if you followed those principles, right? And somebody would send you home because the job just doesn't work that way. So I think if that's in place first, then, as a foundation, then on top of that, you can start going into more of the nuances of what the police are. And, there's a history lesson there as well. The police are a relatively new phenomenon in America. I don't think they go back, as far as towns having police departments, I don't think that's much more than 100 years old.
1850 was about when London got the first police department. But consider that they had sheriff's departments before that.
Sure. Daniel, anything else you want to share tonight?
No, that's it for tonight.
Thanks for the call. I appreciate hearing from you. Your thoughts on the police and how to approach a situation where a cop is killed and another person in this case is killed, an individual, a controversial, sad, tragic situation. How best to approach that as somebody who loves the ideas of liberty without pandering at the same time to the cop lovers out there. This is not easy. 855-450-FREE. You can share your thoughts here on Free Talk Live.